sir, you've certainly vanquished all your enemies, the elementary school, the local tavern, the old age home. You must be very proud.
No, not while my greatest nemesis still provides our customers with free light, heat, and energy. I call this enemy the sun. Since the beginning of time, man has yearned to destroy the sun. I will do the next best thing. Block it out.
Good God.
Imagine it, Smithers. Electrical lights and heaters running all day long.
But, sir, every plant and tree will die. Owls will deafen us with incessant hooting. The town sundial will be useless. I don't want any part of this project. It's unconscionably fiendish.
I will not suffer your insubordination. There has been a shocking decline in the quality and quantity of your toadying, Whalen, and you will fall into line. Now!
Well, folks, that was a clip from The Simpsons, of course. As you may recall that episode from way back in the golden age of The Simpsons, when episodes were actually good. I don't even remember the last time I watched this show. It's probably been 15 years or more. In any case, welcome, guys. This is All Minus One. Please like, share, subscribe, all those good things. Go to the links in the description. Subscribe to my alternative channels. Wherever you are watching this at, whether it be Rumble or BitChute or YouTube, go elsewhere. Now, Rumble and BitChute will probably not do anything with any of my content because I'm not very controversial. But YouTube, on the other hand, thinks otherwise. So if you are subscribed to me purely on YouTube, go to those other sites and check out what I have there, because we all know that big tech is not a friend of free speech. Also, go over to DLive or YouTube. Also, Trovo now. I need to get that in the links. I don't have that yet set up, but we are on Trovo now. The Ends Justify the Memes. It is a live show. It is on a separate channel than this. I do it every Wednesday with a co-host / producer. Every Wednesday, 7 p.m., The Ends Justify the Memes live show. Much more relaxed. A lot more fun, less serious topics, and we try to have guests on. So, guys, why did I play the Simpsons clip? Well, this is why. Because this has been in the news for a while now, and we're going to talk about it briefly. I actually had a separate topic to talk about today, which I will get to probably next Tuesday. In any case, it is whatever. I do this all the time. I find other stuff and I'm like, oh, I kind of want to talk about that, and push the other project off. That is part of my personality. Sorry if you don't like it. Hopefully it keeps the channel lively and not me talking about the same things over and over again. Because my goals here on the channel, generally speaking, are to create or weave the narrative of independence and being a rugged individual, to be strong-minded, and yet understand that we must live within the community of our nature, that we are social creatures, and that the collective should not be independent of the individual, but the individual cannot be independent of the collective either, if they're going to live within the collective in any way, shape, or form, which means that there has to be a symbiosis between these. And what we are experiencing right now in society is the complete opposition to the ideas. And no one believed this in the age of classical liberalism, which I would consider myself. And that is the free markets, laissez-faire capitalism ideal, and the ideal of small governments there as a night watchman, only there to take care of the things that need to be taken care of, like providing for your safety from, things like murder and robbery, that kind of stuff, providing court systems, that kind of stuff. Basic things. Not a welfare state, not a state that provides moral guidance in any way, shape, or form, nor a state that centrally controls the economy. Those are all bad things. Those are all authoritarian, and they all lead to corruption, and with corruption brings a weak society. So, topic. Harvard's plan to blot out the sun is a great idea, says Bill Gates. Well, not really. This is from Interesting Engineering. This was January 28th, 2021. Harvard could start testing, experimenting with blocking a section of sunlight this June. Now, this is far more nefarious than it actually seems. It is an experiment, but only a individual like Bill Gates would be involved in such a thing like this, right? Or, Montgomery Burns, who wants to block out the sun, so everyone must use electricity 24/7. In Bill Gates' situation, this is an issue of the climate. And as all these people believe that, and by the way, all these people have been wrong time and time again with every single one of their models, but the environment must come first before all of humanity, or there will be no humanity in the long term. And the environment must go through, or we must go through as human beings, drastic measures in order to save things. Instead of adapting as we go, as the natural course of things are all throughout societal history, all throughout, species history that we're aware of. Any species, species adapt to the environment that they're in. You want to talk about these ideas? Let's talk about the Galapagos finches, Darwin's finches, if you would. And of course, Darwin didn't really study the finches. That's a whole big giant myth created by evolutionists. But what we do know is that the finches do change according to the seasons, according to the generations, based on the needs of the food. Is it scarce that year? Where do they find it? And whatever else. So their beaks will change. They're all the same species, though. And this is actually what happens, folks. And just like we have gone through ice ages and warmings, global warmings in the past, and catastrophe. In fact, we know, pretty certain, we know that about 13,000 years ago, there was a global catastrophe, probably a global flood, such as the biblical account attests to, or the account of many cultures, many societies, is at least somewhere around 400 global flood stories. We know that society faced a great catastrophe a long time ago, and some would put that about 6,000 years ago. But if you look at the work of guys like Randall Carlson, it seems to be, and other folks that are into geology, Robert Schock, Robert Schock, I think is his name. It would be another one who did a lot of work with the Sphinx. They believe that the catastrophe that happened, the ideas of the global flood that come from us all the way from the Babylonians and the tale of Gilgamesh, from the Christian scriptures, we have the story of Noah and his family and the flood. And then, of course, there is from Solon and later on Plato, the tale of Atlantis, and where this ancient advanced society went to, how it disappeared, and why. And the fundamental lesson of it, interestingly, was that Atlantis was destroyed because of hubris. Because of hubris and corruption, because they lost their way. Interesting how that goes. The biblical account is very similar. That God said that all on earth were evil, and they could do nothing but create evil, and therefore he wanted to start over. And yet here we are thousands of years later without learning a thing. We want to blot out the sun to protect us from global warming, from climate change. The sun, by the way, being probably the number one factor that actually keeps us, or changes the climate and totality. That seems to be the case when we compare the geological record, when we compare the geology and the ice core samples to what we are aware of or believe the cycles of the sun have occurred over the centuries. They seem to correlate quite well. In any case, that's a whole aside. So, scientists at Harvard University propose a radical experiment capable of lowering the effects of global warming. I thought it was climate change, but global warming. We'll go back to the old terminology. And Microsoft founder Bill Gates is backing the idea with money, according to a briefing from the ETC Group. The first test could go forward as early as June 2021. Harvard scientists to experiment with blocking direct sunlight called the stratospheric controlled sorry, I'm just going to say perturbation experiment, or the SCOPEX. The project is a scientific experiment designed to help us better grasp the possibility of applying stratospheric aerosols in the field of solar geoengineering. The experiment involves improving the fidelity of simulations, computer models of solar geoengineering to generate answers to vital questions surrounding the notion. To fully understand both the risk and benefits of solar geoengineering, scientists will rely on these simulations, but there is an inherent risk of relying on simulations, namely, current technologically tends to predict an overly optimistic outcome. Not in the case of climate models, though. Here's the problem with computer models. They don't account for human action, as Ludwig von Mises would say. Human action cannot truly be accounted for. It can be predicted for, cannot be accounted for, though. You can make a prediction on how a human will react, but you cannot know for certain. What we can know, though, are the kind of laws that govern things, which is what science works around to discover. And as far as climate science goes, we have it totally wrong because not a single prediction has been right. It's not a real science. It's pseudoscience, folks. I'm sorry to say that. Now, I'm sure some lefty will be out there that will get mad at me, or some big brain, or some climate scientist will go, no, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just a layman. Blah, blah, blah. I understand what I'm talking about. I understand basic things, metaphysics, first principles, logic. I get how things work, guy. I get it. Trust me. I may not be an expert, but I tend not to trust the hubris of your expertise either. Mainly because you're often proven wrong, which makes you even more arrogant that you continue to think that you're right. So let's keep moving on. Over here to Newsweek, this is March 26th, so just recently. Fact check, is Bill Gates trying to block the sun? By Jason Murdoch on March 2nd, 2021. A good name. I wonder if he's ever seen Murdoch and Murdoch. Probably not. Probably not. Don't watch that show, guys. It's evil. It's full of Nazis. Billionaire philanthropist and Microsoft founder or co-founder Bill Gates is no stranger to conspiracy theories and speculation about the project he funds. Well, yeah, he wants to vaccinate the world. He thinks we're overpopulated. Now he's involved with this thing, trying to save the world with his billions of dollars. He would do a lot better, I would say, if he would open some businesses and employ some folks in some third world nations and improve their economies. That would be what I would be doing if I had his money. Nope, not the case. I'm not sure of a single thing that he's done, by the way, that has improved the nation of Africa or India. Of course, anything that suggests otherwise gets buried by the interwebs and people say it was fake news. One that has persisted in recent weeks involves the experiment by which a team of scientists at Harvard University, known as the SCOPEX, that is testing aerosols that might be relevant to solar geoengineering. And here, some random non-blue check mark. With Bill Gates attempting to block out the sun, I don't believe Texas winter storm was a fluke. The claim, Twitter user, that there's involvement for, Gates to block out the sun, blah, 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 blah. Conspiracy theory and these people. Well, what's he actually doing? Here from Newsweek. Mind you, the date's a little bit further ahead. 20 days later, it says, Bill Gates funded study to dim sunlight may be needed against horrific climate change. Oh, by Jason Murdoch as well. So here, the clickbaity title, and don't get me wrong, we all kind of have to clickbait just a little bit, guys, because you all won't click on it otherwise. I mean, I don't think I'm very good at making up titles, but just 20 days before, we have fact checked. Is Bill Gates trying to block the sun? Well, the conspiracy theory says yes. And in here, Oh, yeah, Bill Gates blocking out the sun. Well, here we have from Entrepreneur, a project supported by Bill Gates is set to temporarily dim the sun. A large balloon will be launched in Sweden to spew particulates calcium carbonate to dim the sunlight. And I'm going to get into an in-depth article about this. All these are kind of in-depth, but the one I read through prior to this, because I thought it was pretty good about the depth and scope of why they're doing this, but I will read this, given that it is a very short read. It says, remember the project where Bill Gates wanted to cover the sun to cool the earth? Well, this summer, the test will begin. According to the Times, a large balloon will soon be launched in Sweden that will spew out particles of calcium carbonate, which is essentially chalk dust. The scope wants to prove that the Scope X that the release of the dust into the stratosphere will eventually divert some of the sun's energy and lower the temperatures of our planet. By the way, folks, coming to a global cooling period, that's going to kill a lot of folks. The warming will not. Now, I know they talk about the catastrophes of rising sea levels and floods and this and that. Yet it's a lot easier to see that coming, to pick up and to move. By the way, rich folks, I know a lot of people say this, Dan Pena specifically, the oil tycoon who is the mentor of Brian from London Real. I can't think of Brian's last name. In any case, Dan Pena gave a speech talking about this and the global warming thing. He's like, no one is not giving out loans to beachfront property. Everyone's still buying there. If they believed it, they wouldn't be investing there. And he's right. He's 1000% right. And see, this is a failure for you in the media and others to be able to predict people's tactics and strategies, predict their behavior based on their behavior, because they like to just listen to people's words because they're idiots. You're an idiot if you take anyone at their word, based on their word, if their word does not get fulfilled in their actions. For instance, Al Gore, living in a ton of luxury and flying around the world in private jets, is not somebody you should be listening to about global climate change. He thought that was a way to enrich himself more and his family more and to gain more power. And so he went after it. He had some understanding of it, enough so that he could sell it. Well, I'm the vice president, and therefore I can sell this because people think I'm important. And no one ever, look, unless you were like a hardcore Democrat, everyone thought Al Gore was a joke. They always have, they always will. Al Gore's a joke. Unless you're a hardcore climate, lefty, insane person, Al Gore's a joke. That's why South Park made fun of him with Man Bear Pig. South Park, I don't know what's up with Matt and Trey, but some years later, just the other year, of course, kind of sort of rolled that back a little bit, but it is what it is, guys. It's whatever. People change their mind. Look, Penn and Teller on their show BS, they rolled their predictions on climate change back a little bit too. I am not. I think that it's mostly a farce, and I think if the Earth is warming, which it seems to be slightly, it's a natural process. And even if it's not a natural process, it is going to actually help out humanity as we have more crops, we have better, more temperate temperatures that people would like to live in instead of extreme temperatures, extreme cold or extreme heat. It'll be more moderate. We know that humans as a species are subtropical, generally speaking. Like we thrive in those areas. That's why the most populated areas in the world or the most fertile areas of the world are, those subtropical regions. People like the Mediterranean and California and certain areas of Texas, they like that weather. Everyone loves, other than like the humidity, everyone loves like going down to like Florida, right? Because it's warm all year long. Cold is something we have to adapt to. And if we block out the sun, there will probably be a lot more cold, which means less crops, more frost, more death, more fossil fuels will need to be burned, by the way, folks, because you got to stay warm in the wintertime. Somebody did not think this through. Let's think this through as just intelligent human beings, real quick. If the Earth is warming, and a large part of fossil fuel use is to keep individuals from going hypothermic, from exposure, from dying from exposure, just to keep warm, wouldn't that use go down as the Earth warmed? I mean, can we just think for a second, just be a little bit logical here and think, well, the Earth is getting really warm. I can have more control over my crops. I can have a longer season to plant. I can rotate crops, of course, which is the intelligent thing to do, even with modern farming practices. Often they don't do that in industrialized farming practices, but I can rest the land, let it repair, let the nutrients build back up, all that stuff. I can raise animals more easily because they can have a more natural diet all year long. Like, for instance, cattle, sheep, goats, they eat grass, and you have to store grass and basically bale hay in order to feed them throughout the winter. Instead, you could just pasture them all year long if the climate was warmer and a milder temperature, if there's less of a swing in temperature over the vast majority of time. We would have more oxygen. You might say, Bill, the carbon dioxide's the thing that's going on. Well, yeah, because we'd have more plants that need carbon. So the more carbon in the atmosphere, the more plants that would grow, and then the more oxygen would be produced. We'd have a more oxygen-dense atmosphere. And plants also, by the way, folks, filter the air. They filter it. They help clean it. We have a whole natural enclosed system that is meant to sustain itself. So there are these things that, to my mind, just seem intelligent, and it seems like it's actually a net good for the Earth to warm. And in fact, over time, it'll actually put more carbon back into the Earth, but that's a whole nother thing. Because trust me, guys, we are not going to stop putting it into the atmosphere, and we're definitely not going to stop taking it out of the Earth, because until we can find out some other means of just basic combustion for energy to keep us warm, to make clothing, to make food, it's just going to keep going. It's the way it works. Historical fact: the balloon will be launched near the Arctic Circle, and it will be the first series attempt to test whether global warming will be kept under control by dimming sunlight. I doubt it. And I think this is a tragic, horrific thing to even try. The research is carried out by scientists at Harvard University and financed by private donors, including the founder of Microsoft, and has the purpose of achieving that the light of the sun is reflected outside the atmosphere of our planet. Yes, but the question is what is the long-term effect, and will you be able to really reverse it once we start going down this route? Because again, this goes back to our hubris. We think we can control the entire ecosystem of the planet, as if we have that kind of knowledge, as if we know all the, second, third, fourth, fifth order consequences that are going to come down the line of playing God. Let's see here. It says scientific opponents of this project believe that the solar geoengineering could bring imperative risk and extreme changes in weather patterns that would be no different than current warming trends. In fact, it might be far worse. We don't know. We don't know the consequences. Again, for scientists to have little testing things like this, like the amount is minuscule, folks, but that's one thing. But to have a plan to fund this and to say, well, we might have to do this as an emergency method. On the other hand, environmentalists fear that a dramatic change in the mitigation strategy will become a green light for greenhouse gases to continue to be emitted without any variation in current consumption patterns. And again, this goes back to Malthusianism, and it's just a stupid death cult society thing that lefties love to be a part of. So real quick, this is just an aside, but I don't know if you all have seen the movie Highlander 2, the famous 80s movie, The Highlander, short little film, kind of got popular. There's a TV series based off of it. Numerous movies. The second one of the worst movies ever made. It's like literally considered one of the worst movies ever made. But the second one has this part in it right here. It says, This is part of the plot. It's just an interesting little aside. It's just, by August of 1994, the ozone layer, and I remember the ozone was a big deal when I was a kid, although we have seen where the ozone's repaired itself, is fading and will be completely gone in a matter of months. Millions perish from unfiltered solar radiation, including the main character's wife. Before dying, the main character basically decides to solve the problem. And in a scientific experiment with another guy, creates an electromagnetic shield to protect the Earth from radiation, which at this point then blocks out all sunlight and saves humanity for time being. And then, of course, this creates a whole other series of issue. And part of that is, but the shield means condemning the planet to seeing the sky no longer, the stars, the sun, and uncomfortably high average global temperatures and high humidity. Unable to see the sky for decades, many begin to suffer depression and loss of hope. Yeah, we know that actually does in reality happen to people that live up north that aren't used to the long days or long nights. When you're basically experiencing 23, 24 hour, 23, 22, 20 hour long days or nights, certain parts of the year. It's not natural for us. Like I said, we are inherently a subtropical species. Unable to see the sky for decades, suffering depression, and continues to decline due to violence, greed, and crime. Many even grow to hate Connor, because he did the thing because the ozone layer. And then it talks about it falls under some faction, da-da-da-da-da. But anyways, the point is this has been around in science fiction before, and this is like what Bill Gates is talking about. Like The Simpsons here, like Mr. Burns plans to blot out the entire sun. It's just absolute absurdity. Of course, it's a joke in The Simpsons, but when Bill Gates does it, it's, we need to talk about conspiracy theories. Huh? Like, people are just quoting news articles, oh, conspiracy theory. Like, people are actually playing around with the idea of being able to blot out the sun in order to save the earth because they're crazy, folks. It's that simple. Operation Dark Storm, we don't know who struck first, us or them, but we know it was us that scorched the sky. At the time, they were dependent on solar power, and it was believed that they would be unable to survive without an energy source as abundant as the sun. Morpheus to Neo from The Matrix. You remember in the Matrix movie, most of you, I'm sure, out there have seen that. They blacked out the sky to stop the machines from continuing because, well, it was either destroy the sky and block out the sun and die with the war of the machines, or just go completely extinct. Of course, they then become batteries because they didn't think of the consequences in the long term. It's why you should be slow to act. It's also why you don't act out of your passions, folks. It's why you don't act out of your lust or your anger, if possible. And let me tell you, you're just a little kid if you don't have that kind of self-restraint to walk away, let yourself cool down, or whatever else. Children are emotional. That is why they have temper tantrums. That is why they throw themselves on the floor. That's why when you send them to the room or put them in timeout, they scream and yell. That is why we do simple disciplinary things like spanking them, like a quick swat on the butt or on the hand, because we know that there's an emotional tie there that tells them, oh, I can't do that. And what they're doing when they get emotional like that is they're saying, I'm the center of the universe. Help me, come to me. And I'm going to act like this, like a crazy person until you respect me. And that's what they do. And they get higher and higher and higher and they escalate more and more and more until they have to calm themselves down. They have to figure it out. Many of you, probably not you listening to me, but many of you know people, if you're not one of these people listening to me, who act like this on a regular basis. We have a massive crisis in leadership and fatherhood and discipline of children. And that's part of the reason why we have these issues we have. We have helicopter parents. We have parents that are afraid to let their children go out into the world and hurt themselves. We have a mindset of fragility, that our children are overly fragile, versus Jonathan Haidt's conception of anti-fragility, growing your children up to be tough. And when you see an adult that starts screaming and yelling and falls down, or, you know, these 40, 50-year-old people we haven't seen in a while, but at these marches, and they go, they do whatever. They're children. They're not adults. And see, adults in the room, they come up with ideas that make sense. So one adult in the room that I really like when it comes to environmentalism is Bjorn Lomborg. And he has this really great, he's got a book. I have not read the book, but I watched the documentary, and I've watched many hours with Bjorn on many interviews. And he gets into the environmentalist issue. And Tank and I have talked about this over on the Ends Justify the Memes before. Left-wing environmentalism isn't about environmentalism, folks. It's about controlling you. It's always about authoritarianism, control. That's all the left is. In every single case, it has to social engineer everything, has to control it, has to put it in whatever sense of justice that they have, instead of understanding that people must be allowed to be free, and justice will be disseminated by nature or God, if you would, that it will happen. They must be the arbiters of justice. They must control it. They must be in charge. They have to be the ones who control everything, because it feeds their ego and their existence. And Bjorn isn't like that. In fact, he has done a lot of study, and he realized all the lefty environmentalism is just ridiculous. In fact, it makes more of a problem. It's worse. And in his book, or at least his documentary, Cool It, he talks about all of the alternatives that you will never hear about on your MSNs or your CNNs or your CBS or ABCs. You might hear about it on Fox News on occasion, but you're going to hear about it a lot less there. And the argument is always going to be about fossil fuels. And there's a reason for that, because that is what they have to make sure you keep your eye on, because that's where our money is tied, and that is why we have power. And I'm not talking about the big corporations that run those things, although they have power. I'm talking about the governments, folks, and especially the United States governments. And I'm talking about the UN, because the UN is the one who helped establish the new standard, the Bretton Woods standard, and then later on the removal of the Bretton Woods standard under Nixon. And they dictate most of our global policies and how we do things. Now, you might say, but Bill, I watched the UN, and they argued, and they did this and that, and we've gone against the UN numerous times. Yeah, not like Trump. Remember when Trump talked about getting out of the UN? What a big deal that was. Many of you probably forgot about that because you haven't heard about it, because it happened like 4 years ago now. But he was like, why are we even in the UN? Talking about getting out of NATO. Oh, we can't do that. Can't get out of the globalist NGO organization. Why? Russia's not a threat. It's absurd to think that Russia's an actual threat. I'm not saying Russia doesn't have military power. They don't have nukes, or they don't have people or resources. I'm saying that Russia has a very small GDP, still trying to get itself organized after their many years of communism. And they have their own issues they're dealing with, folks. They're not a real threat compared to NATO, and they never really were. The Soviet bloc was never a threat. I'm sorry to tell you guys, when your people are poor and starving, you're not a threat. It's like thinking Venezuela is a threat right now if they were some sort of building up some sort of military power. Or Cuba. Remember when Cuba was building up back in the day? You know your history? When Cuba built up, what was going on? Well, it was the Soviet Union supplying them, right? Poor nations are not nations of threat. So, here from Fortune, Bill Gates on why the miracles of solar and wind energy won't save us from climate change and the breakthroughs that just might. Conversation with Microsoft co-founder and famed philanthropist about the genius of cement, the thrill of the impossible Whopper, and the book it took him 10 years to write. Okay, this is back in February. So we're going to listen to Bill Gates because he is the expert. Oh, I have to register to read. Dang it. Well, this is the last article I wanted to read. What I was understanding this article was Bill Gates was saying, well, you know, getting rid of fossil fuels alone won't be enough, or solar panels or whatever else. Again, I don't know why Bill Gates is the authority on these topics, but it's the way it goes. So from the Independent, Indy 100, Bizarre conspiracy theory claims Bill Gates is trying to block out the sun. This was just from February. Now, obviously, Bill Gates is trying to block out the sun with these other people that are geoengineering. There was no conspiracy theory. He didn't say he was going to do it permanently. He didn't say, these professors at Harvard didn't say that they were going to get rid of it, but they are testing to see what they can do in order to manipulate the weather, the climate. And we don't know the consequences of this. And instead of just going about things, they have to tinker around in their hubris. Bill Gates' involvement with a geoengineering experiment aimed at slow climate breakdown has prompted viral conspiracy-laden claims centered around the idea that he wants to block out the sun. Harvard scientists are currently working on a project called the Stratosphere Control Perpetuation Experiment, or the SCOPEX, the SCOPEX, to which the Microsoft founder has contributed funding via research grants. For some reason, that word does not just want to register in my brain, but perpetration. The project is aimed at testing the controversial concept of solar radiation management, a form of geoengineering which would see aerosol sprayed high to the atmosphere to reflect some of the sun's rays, in a bid to slow global warming. According to Reuters, the researchers, with the help of the Swedish Space Agency, are planning a dry run in June. And this is planned. This is going to happen, which will eventually see in sending a balloon filled up with 2 kilograms of chalky particles into the stratosphere in order to study real-world effects of releasing them into the atmosphere. Which, by the way, guys, a sample this small, as big as the atmosphere is just... This whole thing is like a non-starter. It's not going to give the scientists much of anything. What they're going to do is they're going to try to extrapolate out this small amount in this focused area out to the whole world, and it's just absurd. So expect there to be more testing over the years and them to justify the safety of this over time. No particles will be released in the June test, which still awaits approval from the Harvard Advisory Committee. But a Harvard scientist involved in the project told Reuters that an experimental releasing the particles could follow in autumn 2021 or spring 2022. So somehow this is a conspiracy theory. While conspiracy theorists are, as another subheadline here, are actually trying to claim that the snow in Texas is fake. I doubt that. I'm pretty sure the folks that were saying stuff like that, just going to take a wild guess here, were saying that it was engineered, that there was weather modification going on. Because I did see some stuff going on around about that. And we've weather modified for a very long time. We can go all the way back to tribal rain dances to, seeding the clouds with cannon fire. Happens, guys. Or airplanes. We do weather modification. On a global scale, though, it's something a little bit different, is it not? While there is a significant, legitimate controversy around the research, the SCOPEX test was soon sensationalized in various publications, such as Mail Online, which claimed the test has been put on hold amid fears that it could trigger a disastrous series of chain reactions, creating climate havoc in the form of a serious drought and hurricanes, and bring death to the millions of people around the world. I don't know why I want to say Americans there. As Snopes reports in the fact check on the subject, these are indeed valid fears about the possible side effects of geoengineering, but no scientist would argue such an outcome could be triggered by a release of the amount of chalk equivalent to a bag of flour 12 miles above the Arctic. Yes, I don't think any rational person would think that either, but I think what you are not talking about here is that article was likely saying that the long-term consequences could be this if it was done in a greater amount, and this type of research was continued to be looked at. And guys, I don't know if you recall the whole CERN thing, but that is a super collider, an electromagnetic super collider that explodes particles. People are quite concerned with that. You get off into the conspiracy weeds, and some people think that that has created parallel dimensions currently, which explains the Mandela effect. Or Mandela effect, not mandala. That's another word. The Mandela effect, the idea that people thought that Mandela had died in prison. And that things change. People misremember things, that there is a cultural conscious. I don't necessarily buy any of that stuff, but I understand the concerns. It says, but the project has also provided fuel for the conspiracy theorist already seizing upon Gates' every move. Maybe if Gates wouldn't be doing so many moves that were, I don't know, global in nature as a person who was never elected, then we could make an argument that people voted with their dollars, but Bill Gates ain't part of Microsoft anymore either. This is not about that. All Bill Gates has ever been has been a very savvy businessman, mind you. A savvy businessman who's a super nerdy dork. And I think Bill Gates is like, oh, I have a responsibility in my wealth to save the world. And he also thinks that he has a responsibility to lead the world, much like Oprah Winfrey and other folks of his ilk. The billionaire philanthropist interested in vaccines has seen him become a target of virulent conspiracies that have risen during the coronavirus pandemic, with baseless theories claiming that the coup and the resultant vaccine drive is part of a genocidal plot by global elites. Why is that baseless? They talk about it. Bill Gates is in a TED Talk saying that there are too many. He didn't correct himself. If he misspoke, I've never heard him correct the record. He said there are too many people on the earth, which is why we need to vaccinate people. Well, I don't know where that logic goes, Bill. But unless what you're saying is the vaccinations are going to sterilize and slow down the birth rate, that's because that's the only logical step that I can take there, is that's what you're saying. Is that the vaccines are going to slow down the birthing rate. And maybe it's because people have a lot of children because children are likely to die. I don't know. That doesn't seem to make sense. But what we do know is that Bill Gates did say that. And he's talked about it a lot. And he's not looking at the actual data that we're going to cap off, according to Hans Rosling. And I bring him up often because he's the only guy I know who really talked about this in the camping of the population. And there's a lot of people who are on the right who talk about replacement birth rates as if that's going to be a bad thing. Yet at the same time, we're worried about automated vehicles and all these conflicting things like immigration. And like, let's get things straight, guys, and focus on what we need to focus on. I don't think the world's going to become overpopulated. I'm going to have my children, frankly. And I'm very much into allowing leftists to not breed anymore. Not by force, but if they don't want to have kids because the world's going to die, the world's going to burn up and human beings are a virus to the earth. Sure. You believe that, you go right ahead. And we'll let that mind virus go extinct on its own. Now, the idea, driven in part by the media headlines that Gates wants to block out the sun, appears to be being woven into these fantastical and pernicious narratives, painting the Microsoft founder as a eugenicist. Or eugenist, yeah. Bill Gates blocking out the sun is not even a new bad headline. But this time he is doing it during the pandemic to block out our source of vitamin D. Hey, I didn't even think about that. That's true. You get vitamin D through mushrooms too, guys. You can also get it through some fish, cold water fish, cod liver, very good source. The move is controversial enough that it is without drifting into the realm of conspiracy. Well, okay. Let's define some terms real quick, because the word conspiracy means something very simple. That you got together with a couple people and you decided to plot to do something. So if my wife, my daughter, and I get together and conspire to go get ice cream. We've just participated in a conspiracy. Yes? And perhaps there is a negative connotation to that. But the reality is that that's all that the conspiracy means, is to get together, to collude, if you will. Notice how the language changed. It wasn't Russian conspiracy. It was Russian collusion. Because conspiracy can only be used for those you must discredit. And you could say, well, but Bill, they discredited Trump with collusion. Yeah. But if they said Russian conspiracy, see, that's what the right says about the collusion, that it's a conspiracy of the left. It's a story. It's a narrative. So this word gets used around a lot for things it doesn't mean. Bill Gates funded, as well as others, people at Harvard and in Sweden's space program to do this. So you had a group of people that got together and conspired to do a scientific test. Sounds like a conspiracy to me, folks. On the other hand, opponents of solar geoengineering schemes fear that they would simply distract from the need to reduce fossil fuel emissions and could become a somewhat addictive tool, continually deployed in greater force to mask some of the problems driving man-made climate change without actual addressing them. There is no evidence for flat-out anthropomorphic climate change. That is human-driven. There is no evidence for that. We only see that there could be some contribution, and we don't know how minimal or how maximal that is. We don't know that. There is no percentage. There is no science on that whatsoever. There is only some agreement that there is some nominal influence. And some people think that that influence is not nominal. So that's what we're arguing over. But once again, the issue is never quite clear when you're dealing with a leftist. It's all or nothing with them. It's all my ideology or you're evil. Furthermore, it is argued that geoengineers or engineering schemes could have unintended consequences by changing weather patterns that drive droughts and hurricanes. Well, duh. And there are serious questions over how solar geoengineering would be regulated. Yeah. Well, it's going to be regulated in the global government, because guarantee you, as soon as global government is implemented by 2050, that will be, this will be a mainstay, guys. This will be regular. We're talking 30 years from now. I have no doubt. In the 40 years of my life, I have seen a lot change. I remember, I have a pretty good memory, but I remember in my youth, the differences in things. Hell, I remember getting a debit card when I was in the Marine Corps and still being weary of using a debit card because I didn't want to use electronic transactions, yet I just got addicted to it. But that is the thing. And transactions at the time were like, you had to go to the bank or you had to find a ATM machine. Not all ATM machines were, open 24-hour like they are now. By the way, folks, that's part of automation that no one ever complained about with banking. No one complained about the jobs lost in banking by ATM machines, automated tellers. No, yeah, it's just a convenience. And this is the thing, you gotta look at these things. It's not quite that simple, but you gotta look at things and compare them in the changes of technology. We cannot be Luddites, folks. We just have to understand that technology comes and it unfolds, and there is a novelty and an appropriate way to use the tool, and there is a misuse of the tool. Cars have been around for over 100 years, and I can misuse a car, right? Well, its opponents have pointed to global 2010 moratorium on geoengineering under the UN Convention and biodiversity. This allows exemptions for small-scale scientific research. And these involved in the Harvard project reportedly do not believe they need to seek special approval for the flight of the government in Sweden, where it will be launched. But they are still awaiting a decision from Harvard's own advisory board. But despite the precedents and experiment which set, it remains relatively small in scale, and the main concerns center around the argument that it is a slippery slope to larger efforts. It always is. The slippery slope argument is not a fallacy when you can connect the dots. It's if you are unable to connect the dots that it becomes a fallacy. There is no merit in this test except to enable the next step. I would agree. But David Keith, a Harvard professor involved in the project, would tell the news agency that while there are very many real concerns about the risk of solar geoengineering, understanding them requires a range of activities, including experiments. And Gates has previously spoken of it as an insurance policy, which will hopefully not be needed. Yeah. I don't think blocking out the sun is an insurance policy. I think that is assured mutual destruction. So guys, that's it. Like, that's what I got. But the official news came out just the other day that this is moving forward, and it will continue to move forward. I haven't talked about it. I haven't covered it. I don't cover Gates that often, really at all. I've been focusing on the Great Reset and Klaus Schwab. But let's understand that these are the folks that are in charge. These are the folks that decide and dictate things. And let's understand that our federal government's not protecting us from that. Our state government's not, and our local government's not. It's incumbent upon us to be informed, to inform others, to understand what's going on, to use our dollars and our money and our influence, as big or little as it may be, to make people aware of these things and to change their mind away from them. Like, literally, the idea here may be good intentioned, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? And this generally is often the case with the left. The left always wants to intercede. Well, I'm going to get a little Jordan Peterson on you real quick, because he'll tell you that most interventions don't do well. In fact, they do the opposite. Most times you intervene with things, guys, it is just a fact of life. You will create a worse reaction than if you just let it happen. Having a conversation with somebody and warning them or providing advice is not an intervention. I mean, flat out trying to stop something by doing something directly. Interventions are not easy, and they're not usually successful, and they tend to make more problems. And I talk about this often. This is a very primal concept within economics. When you do something, there is a reaction, and that reaction has consequences. And you have to take that into account. It doesn't mean we should never act. It means we should act rationally, and we should act with a little bit of wisdom, right? A little bit of reticence, not to change too much, just a little bit of correction, because the consequences down the line may unfold greater things. Bill Gates, giving vaccines around the world, giving speeches about the pandemic, talking to, the World Economic Forum, talking about climate change, blacking out the sun, whatever else. What is Bill Gates really doing to assure the public that what he wants to do is in their best interest? What is Bill Gates really doing to convince anyone that we must do this, other than what comes out in the media? I mean, I see what the media is doing to convince people. It's saying you're a conspiracy theorist if you believe Bill Gates wants to blot out the sun, as we write a story about how Bill Gates may potentially blot out the sun. This is the world we live in. This is the evil of the kingdom of Satan. I don't know, guys. Just some things for you to think about. I will probably come back on Tuesday with Cyber Polygon, because that's what I was going to talk about originally today. Had that planned out a little while ago and just have not gotten to it. Cyber Polygon was an event, much like Event 201 and the World Economic Forum, talking about a cyber attack that the World Economic Forum predicts is going to happen. Amazing. It's interesting. Every time they predict these things, they just tend to happen not too long afterwards. Yeah, that'll be Tuesday. On Monday, I don't know if I'm going to pre-record, record, not record. I don't know. I have to go down to Chantilly, Virginia, which is a bit of a drive because my wife and I are working on this birthing center thing, so we don't have to give birth in the hospital. And that's the closest one our insurance will cover. And even though there's one like 30 minutes down the road. In any case, so that and the traffic, between the distance and the traffic, I'm probably going to be gone all day and may not even have any content Monday. Hopefully I'll get something pre-recorded or something up. But just be aware, if you guys watch this today, keep an eye out Monday. Today is March 26, 2021. So keep an eye out Monday if there's content or not. If there's not, sorry. It's just, the way it goes. As I get closer to her due date, I will likely be doing less content. Again, just the way it goes, guys. And I will come back, of course, with content. I will try and do the live show regardless. But, by the time she has Fiona, when she arrives, I'll have been at this for nearly a year. And it'll be all right for me to take a little break again. So, I don't know if I'll know what to do with myself, but then again, also I'll have a newborn. It'll keep me plenty busy. So, guys, I appreciate you watching. Please go like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Go find the links in the description. Go sub there, share, all that good stuff. This has been All Minus One. I appreciate you all watching, and I wish you all well.